For today's show, I want to do a tribute to Eddie Van Halen. And no, I'm not a musician. I have a guitar. I play a little bit, but I am in no way, I am not a professional musician. But I want to do this tribute from the perspective of a fan, and also from a perspective as a marriage and family therapist. So Eddie Van Halen, he died on 10/6/2020. He was 65 years old. And I've been thinking about this a lot this week. To me, one of the most difficult things about life is when a person who is at least partly responsible for a lot of great memories in your life, that at some point they just become a memory themselves. And no, I don't know Eddie Van Halen. I don't know anybody in the band. I've never met him, never seen him, never talked to him, never wrote to him, nothing like that. But I do know greatness when I see it. And I know greatness when I hear it. And although I never had the ability to be a great musician, I have been really good at other things. And it's one of the things I think about. And when I see somebody like him from when I was 13 years old, I thought, yeah, he's great. At that time, I wasn't great at anything. And I thought, I'm gonna be good. I'm gonna be great at something. I don't know what it is, but I understand the practice that goes into it. And I definitely want to be great at something. And I could definitely say that he's been a good influence over my life, for sure, as is Jimi Hendrix, as you could see behind me. You know, so Eddie Van Halen, obviously an innovator, incredibly influential. I think if you had the Mount Rushmore of guitar players, you know, there'd be very few that you could think of that would be there. We might name Chuck Berry, you know, for how he moved guitar from one position to another. I think Jimi Hendrix obviously took the guitar to heights that nobody has seen or heard before. And then we're looking maybe at one more. And I would say Eddie Van Halen obviously has changed music history. He's changed culture. And since then, I don't know if anybody else has come along that's done more than him. And I know just the law of percentages, someone would have to come by to be able to pick up where he left off, but it's kind of hard to think that would happen, being that it hasn't happened yet, and I just don't see it like that. So why do I feel so sad, being that I don't know him? Well, maybe I look at my own mortality, because when I first heard him in February of 1978, I was 13 years old, and now I'm 55. So I can start to look at some of my heroes, you know, people I had pictures on my wall. And it's tough. Yeah, I mean, you definitely look at your own mortality. You look at your loss of youth, maybe. Particularly, like, you know, the end of an era. You know, what did Eddie Van Halen stand for? You know, it's interesting. Like, me and my friends, we used to go to shows all the time, you know, Black Sabbath, Motorhead, Slayer. And one of the interesting things at all these shows is that it mostly attracted adolescent males. And there was a certain anger in those audiences. And when Van Halen came along, he made heavy metal or hard rock music a beautiful, like, thing where it was happy. Like, no matter how much of a virtuoso type of solo he was doing, he always had this grin or this smile on his face, making it seem so incredibly easy. And there was no evilness or anger in that band or their music. And, you know, they wore all these, you know, fancy, like, you know, different kind of clothes and different colors. And, you know, for the first time, it really attracted women. And going to my first Van Halen show, I think I was 15 years old. It was, you know, at that age for a 15-year-old boy, I couldn't believe how many girls were there. I mean, thousands of pretty girls wearing nice clothes and nice makeup and nice hair. You know, and you fast forward today, it's like, what did we lose in the era? And I'm like, I look around and I see people and they're sad and depressed, and not just because of COVID. I mean, look around. I mean, since when has there have been any artistic achievements lately? You know, even in movies, like the last great movie that was considered to be the top 100 movies of all time, I think was Forrest Gump. That was 26 years ago. This is 1994. Other than Jack White over the last 20 years, I mean, where's the good music? You know, so we've really lost a lot. I've played Van Halen, I have played Jimi Hendrix for some of my younger clients, you know, trying to inspire them. And they look at it like they're looking at aliens, that they don't even know what it is. You know, music played by human hands. Who cares? What's that all about? So it tends not to inspire that many people that I know of today. So I think I'm mourning the loss of a whole culture. It's kind of sad in that sense. So I did mention that I'm a marriage and family therapist, so I want to combine some of that here because that is my expertise. And I want to talk about a guy named Dr. Bandura, who talked about social learning theory. And what he said is that learning is not just cognitive. In other words, it's not just mathematical where you go 2 + 2 = 4. Learning takes place socially and when you connect with people. And it also takes place when you observe. So there's a lot of social connection and social context, and we try to learn from other people. Now, I remember when that Van Halen album came out, and I can tell you this, I used to go to my cousin's house, and what we would do is, you know, we'd do normal things back then. We'd play a little baseball, jump in the pool. But there was a time that we would always listen to records, and my cousin was a Beatles fan. Beatles 24 hours a day. But when that Van Halen album came out, all of a sudden a light switch turned on, and it became, okay, I need to learn how to be a guitar hero. And I would listen to him play all the time, and it was just this thing of learning and learning and learning. And he wasn't alone. We would go to different parts of town walking around, and there would be plenty of people in their garage learning how to play music. Even at the junior high or high school eventually that I was at, there was plenty of talent contests where people, you know, they did have already Van Halen cover bands, Aerosmith cover bands, Leonard Skinner, Led Zeppelin. I mean, this is really high-end musicianship for a bunch of young kids. And just like Dr. Bandura would say, you know, it's like the learning is not just having your head in a book in school, it's about the social context. So in terms of this, I don't think I would have any trouble arguing that when that first record came out by Eddie Van Halen and thousands upon thousands of young adults said, I want to learn how to play like that. And there was also the thousands of people wanting to get into the whole culture of having a good time and wearing fancy clothes and wearing all the different colors and just being happy. He changed culture. So there's no doubt, and I think you could argue that Eddie Van Halen raised the IQ of a whole generation of people. He also raised the emotional intelligence of a whole generation of people as well. I don't think there's any doubt about that. And I have some relative proof, if you want to call it that. I don't know if you can call it proof. Studies suggest and they indicate, but they don't actually prove anything. So I'd like to talk about the Flynn Effect. The Flynn Effect has been where over time that the IQs have been raised over the last however many years they've been looking at this. So all cultures, their IQ has been raised. So I want to read a little bit from this study so I don't get it wrong and so you believe me that it's an actual study. And then I'm going to relate it to Van Halen. So sometimes the average IQ is raised because of better nutrition and better education. However, new research is indicating that the Flynn effect may be in reverse. And this is a direct quote. People are now getting dumber, and that's not a judgment, it's a global fact. We are seeing a noticeable slowing or even a reversal of IQ around the world. IQs have lowered in this incredible era of technology. Now, this study was with over 730,000 people, so it's a massive study. And it comes to this conclusion of why IQs are being lowered all around the world. And the number one reason, I mean, we could talk about pesticides and all that, but that's for another show. But the number one reason why IQs are being lowered around the world, and it's got it right here in the study, a foremost concern is the lack of focus, which is not only lowering overall intelligence, but affecting our ability to stick with complex tasks and the capacity to make reliable decisions. It's also taking a toll on our emotional intelligence as we become victims of decision fatigue from too much technological stimulation. There's a universally growing pressure that what is important now will not be important in 10 minutes. Very few people now take the time required to dissect and solve challenges, let alone the time to complete tasks. And so going back to when that first Van Halen album came out, what you see is thousands of people with laser-like focus saying that they want to be better. And even if they never picked up a guitar before, they were inspired to do it. And yes, they had laser-like focus. And they had the ability to stick with complex tasks, and they made the right decisions to be able to continue to do that. And again, here it says there's a universally growing pressure that what's important now will not be important in 10 minutes. So people don't take the time to solve challenges. Well, think about what it took back then to learn how to play. You had to take the record, take the needle, and keep putting it back and back and back, hundreds, if not thousands of times, learning how to play. And then what you would do is you would go to a friend's house and then you would play with them. So what I'm saying is there's incredible social connection that took place back then that you do not see today, or well, you can, but it's rare. And also you do see people with an approach that's not just for instant gratification. It's, I'm going to learn this no matter how many years it takes me. And Eddie Van Halen in music was one of the instigators. He never knew that he was doing this, but absolutely he helped in this regard. And IQs have been falling down incredibly since the 1990s. So will you see another guitar hero like him? Maybe, but unlikely. And I think that's kind of sad. So let me get to the other part, how I feel. I mean, I've been feeling like somebody kicked me in the stomach the last few days, because any kind of loss is a big loss. But I want to talk about the part where I'm also angry. And society, I think, has it wrong. I mean, there's been a lot said about Eddie Van Halen's drug abuse over the years. He was addicted to drugs, he was addicted to alcohol, he smoked cigarettes all the time. And they call it drug abuse. With my expertise, I do not call it drug abuse. You don't abuse a drug. The drug was doing exactly what he wanted it to do. It was numbing him, and so he didn't have to face life. There was something in life that was unbearable to him, and as a human being, it's very sad to me. He wasn't abusing drugs. It was self-abuse. He was abusing himself over and over and over again. And at times, he was probably abusing his loved ones around him. He didn't recognize drugs as a problem. He recognized drugs were a solution to his perceived problems. And I just get a little tired of this in this country, that we're so enthralled with people's money and fame and accolades that we think that they can't possibly be sad, and so we don't look into that. Or there's people around them that just don't have the guts to tell them no sometimes. They give them everything they want, even if it's detrimental to them. Some people are too famous and too rich to have anybody in their family stop them, or to say, listen, you need to take care of yourself. And that angers me a lot. How many times do we have to see this? We've seen this for many years, with a lot of musicians, and now we get hit again with this. And every time I read about Eddie Van Halen, they say he died of cancer. That was the last manifestation, absolutely. But do we want to talk about the incredible denial? He didn't just get cancer. You know, he said, oh, maybe he got tongue cancer because he had a metal pick in his mouth. That shows me that he didn't really take a look at his issues. I mean, it's possible he got cancer that way, but then he totally leaves out the fact of how he was abusing himself all these years and nobody around him wanted him or tried to help him stop. Yeah, that makes me angry. Why would he want to stop doing drugs? You know, like you have to ask yourself, why would he want to? You know, because then you have to say, well, what did drugs mean to him? And it obviously meant a lot. You know, what could it have meant to him? Well, according to him, he had a lot of social anxiety and he would have trouble performing without drugs. And so, what did performing mean? So drugs and performing, kind of on the same level. It gave him love. Drugs gave him the ability to connect to people. It gave him an ability to be the musician he wanted to be competent in front of people. Actually, not competent, he was a master, a master of all masters, actually. Drugs gave him the validation he needed, because without that, he would probably be wanting to be by himself in a room, you know, sequestered, which is what he has said in some interviews too. Drugs meant to him that he could numb his negative feelings. He didn't want to be in pain anymore. Drugs to him were a utility. He was able to do it so he could actually play in front of people. Now I know, you know, nobody wants to talk about this, and let's continue not to talk about it. Then more people can die for no reason. You know, I think it's time to have the conversation. You know, it's too late for Eddie, but you know, maybe for somebody else. Somebody could say, well, why could somebody so famous and so talented, where would his pain be? Well, let's take a start. You know, his mother and father were incredibly discriminated against, which creates a lot of social anxiety, right? And then, so the parents moved to the United States, where Eddie and Alex's brother, of course, were subject to lots of discrimination and lots of bullying. And so maybe right there the seeds were sown that they were insecure and not feeling good about themselves. And knowing that the parents had extreme anxiety, we look at that from our parents and we download that into our own psyche. And so that could be a lot of it. When he was 12 years old, he was already a great musician. He had won classical piano contests. He was great already. And he told his father, I have social anxiety, I can't play in front of people. And his father told him, well, do what I do. Smoke cigarettes and drink alcohol. And that'll numb you so you can lower your inhibition so you can play. Okay, so now we know his father was an alcoholic. How does that play? This show is not for that today, but I can tell you there's many massive amounts of damage that does to a child growing up with a father who's an alcoholic. But we don't want to talk about that, right? We should. By the time Eddie was 12, 13 years old, he was already messed up on drugs and alcohol. And it was encouraged and sanctioned in the household by his father. I mean, I love him as a musician, and he's great. But let's look at him as a human being. Under what circumstances could a father do that to a child and not have Child Protective Services come over the house and take those kids away from the family? And then what would happen is that the parents would have to go through parenting skills treatment, and then the father would have to have some type of go to AA meetings or some type of drug and alcohol treatment. That's probably what should have happened, but it didn't. So they get famous, so we just wipe all that away. Later in Eddie's life, he was addicted to Klonopin. Now, what's Klonopin? Again, it stops panic disorder. It's anti-anxiety. So what does that tell me? It tells me he was still hurting. But instead of self-medicating, he was going to a doctor to get more medication instead of actually seeing somebody who could really help him at the root cause level that could have stopped all this. And he never went to a real therapist. He probably went to a doctor, or he probably went to a psychiatrist that peddles more drugs. So he didn't get any help there as well. As a society, I think, we encouraged him, and he was great, and he made our lives better. And I'll always remember him for that. And I'm sad that he's gone. I think as human beings and as a society, we failed him. We failed him. He finally died of cancer, and that's what everybody wants to say, but he didn't really die of that. Somebody needed to get him help a long time ago. And what he really died it's a manifestation of the fact that he had unresolved childhood traumas. And he was never able to deal with his incredible insecurity, but he was able to use that insecurity to make him probably the greatest guitar player who ever lived. So we all benefited, in a sense, from his pain and from a way that he was trying to get over his pain. But as a human being and as a therapist, I so wish that there was somebody in his life that was able to help him. And I do understand, in the music business, everything is supposed to be a big party and having fun, and nobody wants to admit to any of that. And maybe we can say that drugs and alcohol are, it's part of the lifestyle when you're a teenager, or maybe in your 20s. But when it's going through your 30s and 40s up until your 50s, we have to take a look and say, that's a lot of pain inside this man that really needed to be looked at. And if this sounds bad, and it doesn't sound like, any musician would actually listen to me, and as a society, we don't want our musicians to be, going to therapists and to help out their inner pain, don't listen to me. Don't listen to me at all. Let's listen to somebody like Bruce Springsteen, who's probably one of the best songwriters in the history of music, and he's been extremely prolific. He's been around now for 50 years, and he's been very, very open about going to therapy. He's been steadily going to therapy for over 30 years to deal with his depression. And what does his depression stem from? Well, I don't know for sure. I can only go by, his interviews. And what he said is that although his parents were together, his father never gave him the time of day. His father never really validated his existence. And so when Bruce Springsteen was on stage playing these 3-hour shows, and everybody thought, wow, what a great musician, look how much he's giving. He knew that he was actually just being a people pleaser, because what it truly was is that he knew when he turned his back on the audience and walked off that stage that he wasn't going to get love anywhere else. So the only time he felt loved and validated was on that stage. And he, at that time, just like Eddie, probably, the love that he was able to give to other people. And from what I've heard about Eddie Van Halen, he's a very loving, very giving guy. He can love people unconditionally. But the thing is, he didn't love himself unconditionally. He only loved himself when he was perfect. And this is what Bruce Springsteen also had to learn. And, through his courage, he's still with us. And I'm happy about that. So I hope the show's been valuable to somebody. And I just want to leave it with this, because it sounds maybe a little bit negative to some people at the end. I can only thank certain people in this world for being so amazing, and Eddie Van Halen's one of them. I remember that day, I ran 3 miles through the snow to get that first album. And then, of course, I had the album underneath my arm, and I had to run 3 miles back home. So a 6-mile run through the snow, and it was worth it. Everything. That first album, the first song, of course, is Running with the Devil, which is a great song. But when I heard Eruption for the first time, I was like, oh my God, this is like, I don't even know what I was listening to. I just kept playing it over and over and over again. And all my friends heard it, and it was just, it just changed music. I mean, it just did, and it's like, I'm just happy that in the 55 years of my life, that there are people that have crossed my path, even though if I don't know them, that were as amazing as he was, and I was alive for it, and I could only be thankful for that. So I want to thank Eddie Van Halen and his music, and any of the musicians out there that carry on his music, because I just don't have that kind of talent. I can only carry it on by playing it, but the other people out there who are carrying it on by actually playing and being inspired by it, it's really, you're doing a good thing for society as well. So my name is Joe Peroni. This is the Rise Above Project. Hopefully you like the show. If you like it, please subscribe, and even better than that for me, tell a few friends. Thank you.